Hey, what's going on, guys? You're listening to Yuppies and Harpoons. I am the co-host Joe, and with me is the usual Jacob. And we just finished watching the second Republican debate, and we have some thoughts to share. Jacob, what was your immediate takeout? Any standout stars?
Well, I think the first thing to comment on is the facilities and the moderators. I think the location, although it's Reagan's library, which is kind of the symbolic conservative, um, pilgrimage almost, it was a horrible location. You could tell by the acoustics. The candidates could not hear one another. I feel like that led to a lot of kind of rambling on. Issues with mics. It almost sounded like the whole 2 hours was a little bit chaotic, um, especially compared to the first one, which I feel like the moderators were able to keep people a little bit more in line, and candidates answered questions. Here, it was more of a free for all and a lot less substance. I think coming out of this second debate than the first.
Yeah,
In
it was
comparative.
awful. Well, I mean, not to be, I mean, to be very candid, I thought that it was just a mess the whole time.
Yeah.
Now, what was interesting was I think that there was actually some pretty interesting takeaways about each of the candidates. Like, I thought, you know, I actually was starting to really, really like Nikki Haley. I thought I did not like her performance at all. I don't
Mm.
know about you, but I did not think that she sounded super petty. I mean, to come at Ron DeSantis as being anti-fracking, I was like, I mean, I that was like probably the most human Ron DeSantis I've ever seen when he was just accused of something that was so absurd. You just saw him genuinely laugh, like what?
Yes.
Like, and
Yes,
so
and
I
I
actually
I
thought,
ended up fact checking it just because I was a little bit baffled by it, and it really isn't anything of substance. The only thing I can find is DeSantis didn't allow fracking on some Everglades land, something
yeah.
pretty minor, not nothing of substance. um, but she definitely tried taking a little bit more. The thing I think Nikki Haley did is turned it on. I'm trying to win this nominee, not this nomination. I think she attacked Trump. She attacked the other candidates a lot more than anyone else on stage. And at times, I think that came to hurt her, such as her trying to pull up something on DeSantis.
Yeah, and then she tried to lay into Scott there, and I don't know. Sometimes like when how would I explain this? It's like if it felt like she was a batter who went up to the plate, and no matter what pitch she was thrown, and no matter where the location of the pitch was, she was choosing to swing. And that's just not a good strategy in a debate. Like, you don't just go out and decide, okay, I'm going to attack so and so at this
Mhm.
point. And it's like, okay. Like, I thought it just looked like she was trying to start fights, and it's just like that looking like an instigator isn't a way to be appealing. In fact, what I thought was, I don't know if it was in part strategic, but who I thought had the most interesting debate performance was Ramaswamy,
Hmm.
where he clearly was the everyone knew who he was after the last debate, which I
Yes.
think was probably his goal. And now that everyone knows who he is, he wants to show that he's actually he can be presidential. And
Yeah, he really took a completely different tone, almost again being hypocritical in his latest fashion of doing so, but really kind of acted like he was the moral compass on stage and everyone else is just trying to catch up. Where the last debate he was, calling out people, making sly remarks, and then this debate he's kind of saying, oh, why don't we speak in line and things like that. Completely opposite of what he did in the first debate. He set the
yeah,
tone for what a lot of people are doing this time, which kind of goes into going back to Nikki Haley really quick before completely moving on from her. I think what you saw is in the first half of the debate, she almost didn't speak at all. There was almost no time allotted to her. It was several questions in before she even talked, and then again several more questions before she was brought back on. I think towards the end, what her take was to get a little feisty there, to get some attention, because quite frankly, she wasn't getting much. I can't wait to see what the time score is going to be for each candidate speaking, but she definitely did not have a lot of time in the beginning, and the candidates getting more time were a little bit more pushy. I think she didn't have the substance in some of the material, so that kind of went to backfire on her,
Yeah,
going after DeSantis.
it was kind of interesting because uh, the debate was. It actually seemed like the questions were there was a lot of questions asked of Tim Scott, which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
And I just have to be very candid about Scott as well. I don't. I'm not a fan of Scott. To me, it always looks like when he's like at the podium, it looks like he's like maxing out on leg curls, and he's just like, and you can't quite see it, and you're just like, yay! I'm the senator from South Carolina, and I did a lot of really good things.
And he
I actually wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Like, no, you didn't. Like, what are you doing? You co-authored that bill. Like, I just like what?
there's so many brilliant minds on that bill. Do not take credit for it.
Yeah. Well, the truth
I
is
think
the brilliant minds were were Paul Ryan and someone in Obama's White House. So policy
no,
negotiator.
it was the cabinet member. I can't remember his name. Goldman guy. Uh, anyways, I don't have my data here to defend myself here. Well, but I mean, I think Scott fits perfectly as a congressman. That's his role. I don't see him
You mean a
past that.
senator?
Was as a senator, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but in Congress,
But
and I don't see him past that. Really, he
well, and I
represents people, and he doesn't have that executive authority I'm
yeah.
looking for.
Well, and I don't mean to bump her car around here, but I was when you think about Nikki Haley, I had a lot of high hopes for now. Maybe not a whole lot of people watch this debate, and that might be a good thing for her. But um, yeah, she's really gone up. Like if you look at the Real Clear Politics average,
Mhm.
there is a decided spike where she was, especially in New Hampshire, where she was averaging, I think maybe around 5 or 6 percentage points. And then if you look over the past 2 weeks or so, she's gone from like 5 to 6 points and jumped up to like 13 or so, and is a clear number two now in New Hampshire, which is a major accomplishment. And one of the things about I would say that's very advantageous about Haley as a candidate is that if she's polling well in New Hampshire, um, she has some appeal in Iowa, although a lot of that Tim Scott's probably taken a lot of those votes away from her in Iowa. Um, but if she were able to somehow come out ahead in Iowa, you can see somebody winning Iowa, winning New Hampshire, and winning South Carolina. I think someone like Ron DeSantis or Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, those sorts of those guys are just even if they were near the top of the pack, because DeSantis is still near the top of the pack, but even if you're near the top of the pack, it's going to be hard for them to win South Carolina because that's the
Right.
beginning of the Sun Belts where Trump has a significant amount of support. But if you really want to, the argument for Haley's electability is that if you really wanted to defeat Trump, you have someone who could potentially win Iowa, is polling now pretty well in New Hampshire, and whose home state is South Carolina. So she's at like 18%. And so if you deal Trump like a three defeats in a row, that's a punch that could really hurt. But still, it's that's the that's the calculus. Now, I think going forward, it's going to be interesting to see where her support, if she keeps gaining support, if she keeps peeling off from Ron DeSantis. But he's the next guy I want to talk about. Actually,
Yeah.
what do you think of
Well, and I
DeSantis'
guess before
performance?
moving on
Oh
too,
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
touching on some polling there. I mean, yeah, kind of what we're looking at as a country and as a whole is, you're looking at these early polls. So you have Iowa. New Hampshire, South Carolina. With all three of these states, Haley and DeSantis are kind of neck and neck. South Carolina, Haley has a clear lead. That's her home state. You would hope she can lead strong there, and she is, and kind of starting to really erode at Trump's lead there. And you see that in the other states as well. Um, on the flip side of that, you also see Trump right now is polling higher than Biden. Some polls, I think it was an ABC poll, double digits. So people prefer Trump over Biden by a pretty large margin here. And here we go with some data. So
Yeah, you
Trump
can see that
still clearly in the lead by 30 points, 31 points here. But
has a lead of 31. Yeah, 31 points.
and that's been kind of eroding a little bit here. But overall, he's now moving past being more electable than Biden. Now that might change once push comes to shove and people actually have to vote, which is where I'm at. I don't think the latest polling is accurate in terms of if people actually had to vote. I think Biden still wins clearly, but you kind of see Trump's strength in the Republican GOP party eroding slightly, going more towards Haley, Ramaswamy taking a pretty large lead there too since the last debate, and DeSantis kind of some of his strength has eroded but stabilized as well. So creating more of a four-headed race here than we did a month ago. Just goes to show the point trying to make here is a month ago, most of these candidates were around 2-3%. And now you have Haley potentially on the path to win New Hampshire and South Carolina. So a lot can change, and it'll be really fascinating to watch how this plays out after this debate. If there's a bump in ratings, which I don't think there'll be a big movement after this debate.
Yeah. The only thing I could see maybe is Ramaswamy's unfavorability going down, maybe.
Yeah,
Like there were some times where he was actually being attacked, and people wouldn't let him even speak his piece. I was actually feeling a little irritated, and I'm no Ramaswamy fan, but I was watching that. I was like, huh, this is why am I feeling sympathy? And there was I think there's also just a big problem on the stage. They asked the question of who would you write down on a notepad? Write down a name on a notepad of somebody you think should drop out of the race, which I thought was a pretty ballsy question.
yeah,
Like, and then they didn't do it obviously, but and then I guess the real question is, did Chris Christie actually write a name down, or you know but yeah, I guess he said it was Donald Trump. So I thought that was a pretty clever answer by Christie when he was asked, whose name did you write down to drop out of the GOP? And he's like, the GOP race and Donald Trump.
yeah. Which I mean fits his bill. I mean it just puts him in his
Yeah,
box of who his supporters are going to be. Are those never Trumpers? That's his base, and that's going to be pretty critical. He's going to have a lot. I feel Christie is playing his cards he learned from 2016 when he endorsed Trump, and that backfired on him. I am not going to be surprised if Christie takes a long time to throw his support one direction, but wait till he has kind of the maximum amount of support he can get and really have a lot of sway. I think Christie really
yeah,
wants, he's looking at this. I don't think he has any belief he can win, truly. The guy's very aware of the country. You listen to anything he says or anything he writes, he understands, I think, a lot of the foundational issues in our country and the symptoms that we are facing right now from those. He has his solutions, but a lot of them are not accepted by the GOP. Just overall, he's not accepted by the GOP. And he's been put in, rhino. He's a rhino. He's this and that. At the end of the day, he is going to have a certain base. And I think he's really trying to grow that. And he's going to have some influence. on
Yeah,
when he wins.
I think that's an apt point because if he works really hard before the primaries to kind of conjure up a big base of people that might cap out around 15 or 20% or at max. If he endorses somebody, uh, that's a sizable amount of voters to be able to suggest to go vote for somebody else. So
Right.
now I would be surprised if Christie would actually drop out if he was in second, but it's hard to see. Maybe if it got down to a slim race, you could see someone like Christie getting 20%, but I don't I don't see that. And unfortunately, I think that that's the Achilles heel is that you're watching these candidates and you have Mike Pence and you have Burgum. I like both of them, but it's like, really, guys, you're still in the race. I mean, Pence just, I mean, for one, you're talking about the acoustics of the Reagan Library. The lights were just awful, and they made
Yeah.
Pence look like he was 85.
Yeah. It really did.
He looked
No
ancient.
one looked no one looked good on. I mean, Scott had a glare on his. I mean, he's bald and he had a big glare on his head.
Yeah,
Yeah, one
yeah,
angle, I thought he was wearing a hat at first, and
yeah.
then they changed the camera angle, and I realized that he wasn't, and it was just very odd, really, and that made a huge difference. I think the country didn't really get to hear from a lot of these candidates just because they weren't in a facility that was conducive to it.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
been in that hangar myself. It's a hangar, and like any other airport hangar. There's nothing to absorb the sound, and it's not designed for political debates.
right, right. Well, I kind of wanted to go back to DeSantis because DeSantis has been um, really scraping, and he's. I mean, especially in New Hampshire, he was clearly the second place guy for a while. In fact, New Hampshire at one point, a number of months ago, DeSantis was pulling ahead of Trump at one point by 6 points, 42 to 36. So he has just totally fallen apart in New Hampshire, and then it kind of slowly, his support was maybe around 15, then it went to 13, and then now it's maybe around 11 or 10, and so I actually thought that his debate performance was better than it was the first time around, and I thought he looked more human. I thought that maybe the lights and everything didn't make DeSantis look that bad, and there were like he had a lot less awkward looks, and oftentimes I thought the camera might cut away a little bit faster from him before he had time to make a goofy look into the camera. Um, but I thought on substance, he I thought he actually did pretty well. He made a number of points. He called out Donald Trump for not being at the debate, which is something I think that he needs to emphasize more. He talked about Trump on deficit spending, which I thought was a valid critique. But then he also talked about needing a winner in I think it was in between the exchange of Scott and Haley bickering. He says there's a lot of talk that politicians can engage in, but you know look at me, look at what we did in Florida. I actually got it done. I thought just the way that it came out in the moment was a compelling point. And I was happy because DeSantis has done this before. And when he makes a good point, sometimes he like rocks out to his point in a really awkward way. Like he makes a good point, and then like
Yes,
after he's made it, he goes, it's just like, oh God, stop! Like, no,
that's
you
what I
you
wanted
hit
to
it,
comment on. Yeah, next, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And instead, like DeSantis kind of just went with it, and I was like, okay, good, good. Now stop. Oh, good. Yeah. So the problem though that he has is even though I think he did well in this debate is I don't know, it's really hard to stop downward momentum.
yeah.
Um, and I am worried about that. And I think his campaign should be worried about it. But I thought Haley's performance was just uh, very candid. I thought it was abysmal. Like I did not. I like Nikki Haley. I really like Nikki Haley, but in fact, people who were listening to our last recap of this podcast of the first GOP debate, you may have heard that I was like very, very fervently defending Ron DeSantis. That's because for a long time I've seen Ron DeSantis as the only viable candidate who had the polling ability to beat Trump. And if that changes, I'm pretty much the guy. I'm going to support whoever is capable of taking out Trump. And you know, I don't want to see what I don't want to see is somebody who was at the time polling in the high teens, just getting pulled down into the rest of the field and having nobody rise up to replace him, and just have the field average out between 8s and 9s and 10%. Um, where,
Mhm.
but if there is a candidate that can actually replace him and be a formidable opponent to Trump, then I think that's I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you give it 2 weeks here, and we're gonna have a pretty good idea of where polling's gonna be until you start to have some of these, Iowa, New Hampshire. At that point, you'll have consolidation. Until we get consolidation on this 7, really 9-person front, I don't think you're gonna have any candidate gain more or lose momentum like you've seen up to this point. So DeSantis fell a decent amount. He's right around 12, 14%. I think he's going to maintain that for a while. Trump right around that 50% mark. Haley, Ramaswamy around that 6 to 8% mark, and then the rest are
Nationally, you're talking
nationally. Yeah,
nationally. Yeah, yeah,
nationally.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the rest are going to kind of stay there. I think you're going to see that remain true kind of until you see consolidation, until people start dropping out, throwing their weight behind others. That's going to bring in attention then of, if Scott drops out, whoever he endorses, that's going to bring a lot of weight. Me
Yeah.
personally, I don't like Scott as a presidential candidate, but I highly respect him as an individual. If he endorses someone, I'm going to be paying attention. And I think a lot of America feels the same about that. Now, I don't think it's going to swing to the point where Trump is out completely, or because some of the Scott vote might go to Trump, especially if he endorses Trump, obviously. So that's going to really play interesting role. Another thing that's going to really push going to back to DeSantis is Gavin Newsom and DeSantis debate, which is I think scheduled sometime in November, if I remember correctly. I think that's going
Yeah.
to be a huge bump for DeSantis or a huge failure, and it's really going to be up to him. If he showed up similar to what he did tonight, I think that's going to help him a lot. If he
How
showed
did
up,
you think DeSantis did tonight?
you could tell that he was coached and that he focused a lot on coaching to be better at the debate. Some of his facial reactions and his overall body language improved greatly. He held off on some of his expressions. I don't know what it is about the guy. You watch videos of him, just candid videos of him walking around a fairground. He's a normal human being. As soon as he's on that stage, he's like a robot. He like shuts down. He can't function. He doesn't look good. This time around, he was able to push through. You're talking about that like head nodding after he makes a good point. He held
Yeah.
off on that. There was a few times I broke through though, and you could see it, and it was almost like at this point I almost like cheered along, like, "Come on, will he do it?" Because he has this fake smile he puts on. It's like it was almost like he learned to smile by reading how to smile. It's like
hmm
crease the side of your lips and try to make it elevated. And he like does that the best he can, but he doesn't know how to really. Um,
the the
and
thing I
it,
wish he'd stop doing is
yeah,
copying Ramaswamy's policies.
mm,
He,
yeah,
he he did that with the southern border. Like all of a sudden, DeSantis now supports invading Mexico, and I'm like, no, no, just stop. Like you don't need to. You don't need to. It's like the man's lost all knowledge of what made him popular to begin
yeah,
with, and I don't know if it's true or not that he's a normal human. There's a biography coming out about Rupert Murdoch, where supposedly Tucker Carlson invited DeSantis and his wife over to his house with him and his wife, and so according to the book, like DeSantis kicked Tucker Carlson's dog, and then and then like told it to get under the table, and then like spoke with like a really loud voice, like inside. It's
Uh,
yeah, you hear that, you're like, oh god, this is bad.
and you know why it's bad is this could be completely made up,
Yeah,
but I kind of believe it.
yeah,
Like, you know,
yeah.
like it sounds like something you'd make up, but I kind of believe it, even though it's like the gut in me wants it to be true almost,
It doesn't.
even though
Yeah,
like I want him to be in good light. um,
certainly.
and I think that's starting to come out more and more, where he hid it for a while, or maybe he's changed, but that was not as evident 6 months
Tonight.
ago
Oh
as
yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
now.
Sure, sure.
So
I totally though. I want to hit off that that point about the Newsom debate. I wish it wasn't so far away. I think he needs it now.
mm,
Um, but no, I think it's a good. I think it's a good idea, and it's interesting that Newsom is doing it. Because one, like Biden's polls with Trump have gotten really bad. And maybe that's something that we could put on the screen. But like
yeah.
Joe Biden has just completely imploded in terms of head-to-head polls with Trump. And so, bringing that up here,
Did you find it?
yeah. So currently, so yeah, I'll share
Perfect.
it on my screen. So for those watching, um, here we go. So for those watching, for those not watching, what you can see here is that the average. I like to use the Real Clear Politics average because it takes all of the polls and basically averages them out. So you factor in outliers that are for and against each candidate, and basically it creates an average. And so what you can see is that
Yeah, do you not
Trump.
think our listening viewers are educated enough to know what averages are? Should we just start explaining things?
I
I'm
guess we
totally
could.
messing.
We could. It's late. Sometimes I forget. Yeah. So that's for Anthony. If Anthony's listening, I don't know. He's a lawyer, so he probably doesn't know anything about math.
That's
But
true. That's true.
yeah. No, but what you can see is that Trump actually has a 45.4 to 44.3 1.1 lead over Biden in the national polls. Now, people may
Yeah.
think, okay, well, what's the big deal? It's only a point. It's the margin of error. The problem is that as the populations in these big states keeps growing, and the electoral college has actually gotten more and more drifted more and more towards Republicans, um, because you have states like Texas gaining in size and population and becoming more Democrat, um, but still voting Republican. And so what's been happening, and so when that happens, it basically means that even though the electoral college votes don't change, you you have more and more people voting for Democrats and less people voting for Republicans. And so if California, for instance, I think when in 2016, something like 2 million more people or 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 in California than did Barack Obama in 2012. Um, and like the reason for that was because people in California just truly hated Donald Trump. And that's one of the reasons that Trump lost popular votes, because of the added amount of votes that California contributed towards Clinton. But California voted for Obama in 2012, and it voted for Clinton and so the electoral college count didn't really change. Um, and so when you look at the Real Clear Politics average, um, the threshold for Donald Trump to beat Joe Biden in a general election, or really any Republican to beat another Democrat in a general election, is not going to be winning a plurality or winning the more than 50% of the vote. It's going to be winning by a margin or getting within a margin of the Democrat by about 3.5 percentage points. And so the predictor is that if Trump and Biden are, in a neck and neck race, Trump will win a race where Biden gets 50% of the vote and Trump gets 46.5% of the vote because
Mhm.
of the electoral college. That's the threshold. And so what the national polls are actually telling us is that Donald Trump has a cushion of about 4.6%. In other words, he's 4.6% past the suggested threshold that's needed for a Republican to beat a Democrat with the current electoral college adjustment. And so that is uh, very, very, very good news if you're a Republican or if you're a fan of Donald Trump. But very, very bad news if you're the incumbent Joe Biden.
And I think two things that will throw a loophole in past elections, which will only help the case that you're already making there. So California alone has had about 500,000 people since 2020 leave. So that's a net total. So some people came in, but 500,000 people more left than came into California. That's true to many of these more left leaning states. My gut feeling on that is a lot of those folks are conservatives or moderates leaving more left leaning individuals in those states. I could be wrong about that. What that will lead to then is states like Florida or Texas becoming more conservative,
Hmm.
or even moderate, but still going to vote Republican. Um, States like California are going to vote even more left leaning, um, rather than maybe a left moderate. So it's going to further exacerbate that divide.
Yeah.
Second point to make is the Republican Party waking up to minorities. Um, so tonight, famously or not famously, tonight they had a Latina moderator asking questions, many questions kind of targeted towards immigration or towards different Latino countries. That was pretty big. I think that's a big push the Republican Party has been making. If you look in terms of dollar investments, where money's going
Yeah.
towards, you see a
Mm-hmm.
lot towards that Hispanic vote. And I think that's going to be a big factor moving forward is, can the Democrats keep that vote? That's going to be huge. Or can the Republicans win that vote? And that can really sway an election one way or the other without polling really grasping that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the weird things about the polls is like they not the people in Poland, just to provide some clarity there. I'm not talking about the polls in Poland.
Yeah,
I'm talking
I
about
think
polls that,
polling,
yeah.
it's an impossible job to have, but yeah.
Well, again, in case some specific characters in our audience don't quite you get what I mean by polls. I'm referring to surveys. Um,
Not the
but no,
not Polish people.
nah, yeah, right,
Okay,
right,
okay. I thought you were
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about Polish people, and I was going to go on a whole. Okay, okay. We're talking
No,
about
but
the Pew Research polls. Gotcha.
well, yeah, and like there was a recent poll that came out and said that Trump was ahead by 10 points, and again, we're not talking about a Polish person who said that Trump was going to win by 10 points. Anthony, in case you misinterpreted that, um, we're talking about a pollster that came out and said that a specific poll that the pollster released,
So, what
and
did the non-Polish pollster say
yeah,
exactly? What was the
yeah,
percentages there?
it had something like Trump at like 51, Biden at 42, or
Okay.
something like that, or 40, 52, 42. Somewhere in that ballpark. And the problem with it is that if you look at the internals, it had Trump actually losing minorities to Biden by 9 points, and that's just questionable, shall we say? Trump, I think, lost minorities by, I think, 35 plus points, and so you're talking about an order of magnitude. I'm just a humongous swing. Now you might be able to say that he um, gained some support with Latino men or Latinos, and but to have that all reduce all minorities down to a 9% win. And secondly, I would have to actually look more further at the internals. But if you have a poll that says that Trump only lost the minority vote by 9 points, that would actually mean, or that would seem to indicate that Biden actually did surprisingly well with white voters.
Hmm.
For him to actually get 42%, it's like if he lost, if he's virtually in a neck and neck race with minorities, then how in the world is he getting 42%? And that would unless the weights of the poll are really really wacky, um, they would suggest that Biden actually did very very well with white voters, and so there could be a situation where maybe the weights suggest that the white vote has a very very high percentage of the turnout, but and that would need to be adjusted for. So that's the other problem, is that these polls, you know, um, depending on how you weight them, you know, you can virtually make them say anything. And so
Right.
if you get a demographic voting in a way that you don't find very um, persuasive or realistic, shall we say, realistic, you can then just minimize that poll result, that specific internal result, by decreasing the weight that it has in the actual poll.
And I think that's what you're seeing right now with the Trump versus Biden polls, with Trump leading those polls. Is right now it's Trump's not in the headlines. He hasn't been indicted in a few weeks, which is weird to say. A formerly sitting president has been indicted in a few weeks, and now there's no attention on him. But that's kind of the fact. And so a lot more attention has been on Biden. There hasn't been many headlines to pull away from Biden. And so you see Biden's numbers starting to drop. And leading up to the election in 2024, headlines are really going to control polling. And I think we're going to have to take an average over maybe a 12-month period of that's what the polling is going to be reliable, is like an average over 12 months of
Yeah, all of this is just, I find so heartbreaking, because you know it's ridiculous to me that Joe Biden's poll numbers have been going down when at the very moment that he's doing the things that are necessary for the country.
explain
Like
on that, I guess.
I was trying to keep a straight face. Um, no, I don't know.
do, do
I,
you
th-
want to
I think I think he's getting
so
my
what you're
honest
saying,
opinion.
what you're saying is we have the savior, the man who knows all the answers, sitting in the White House, and us as ungrateful swine are just not giving him the polling that he
I
deserves.
think for the most part, American voters can tend to be very ungrateful. Yes, yes,
Well
I
said.
do.
I agree
That's
with you on
why
that.
yeah. So, no, but my overall view of Biden is that this is why politics is just a game, and it's not really something that we can place too much seriousness in, because I don't think that Americans and their approval of Joe Biden really has anything to do with his job performance. I think if the man was 60 years old, he'd be net 10 points in approval. I think
Right.
almost all of this has to do with his ability to get through a press conference. And frankly, after seeing how people can, their whole perception can change based on how they perform on a public stage, like Ron DeSantis. It's kind of made me wonder, maybe Joe Biden behind the scenes is actually, he only lost about 5% of his cognitive ability, but just like, out in public, he's just a totally different figure. I don't know, because I feel like his policies, they've been, when it comes to the IRA, I think like 90% of the funds in the IRA were actually allocated to areas of the country that had high concentrations of low income families.
IRA being
Um,
the Inflation Reduction Act.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just it's been interesting to me, like how Americans decide whether or not they approve of somebody, and I think that's something that I would like to unpack at some point in the future. Is what
Yeah.
what actual stock should we place in a president? And I'm sorry, what stock should we place in the approval ratings of a president in terms of his actual job performance?
Yeah. Well, and I think we're going to disagree on this to a point. The messaging lately has been Bidenomics and what that has done for the American people. The whole administration has been running for the past like 6 weeks here, all about Bidenomics. Everything is great about Bidenomics, and that's not the case. The Inflation Reduction Act added at least 2% to the inflation. So when we were at 7, 8, 9% inflation, we could have been at 4, 5, 6% inflation if that bill wasn't passed. And that's by the government research panel doing that as well. So
Yeah,
I think some Americans are really looking at it and saying like we are struggling to pay our credit card bill at the end of the month, or we're looking at um, childcare or many of these other issues, and that's not really that's hitting people home personally. They fill up every single day, and they see gas prices hovering around $4. I think that translates into votes pretty heavily, and
yeah,
you can directly tie like gas prices. Biden is an anti-gas, anti-fossil fuel person. I'm personally all for transitioning, but it has to make sense. And you see Biden pushing policies that didn't make sense, and then now leading to us paying $4 at the pump when that didn't need to be the case, and there wouldn't have been a negative impact on the environment by doing it otherwise.
yeah,
Um, and I think Americans are paying attention to that.
yeah. I think yeah, the chief critique of the Biden administration with energy is that you don't have to hide the fact that we buy oil, or that we consume oil by buying it from somebody that's not ourselves.
Hmm.
You could just produce it while you need it here in the U.S., and I've never understood why we don't do that. I think that that's one of the silliest things that he's done. Is he's making it harder and harder for people to drill here in the U.S. And to me, it's drill, baby, drill till you need to stop drilling. You know, um, and
and
we just
and
clearly
and
don't need to
really,
stop
it's
drilling
basically
until we
just
can
the U.S. has clean
have an
hands when
energy
it
grid
comes
that
to
can
the Paris
sustain clean
Conference.
energy.
So that we
Yeah,
can say, oh, we don't drill oil, but we use oil, but we don't drill any oil. That's like the
right.
only real argument.
But actually, we're getting off topic a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, but well, we probably should wrap it up actually in terms of.
I guess real quick,
Did you have?
what do you feel about Pence and how did he perform this time around? Takeaways. Last time we kind of spoke very highly of how he performed. He was the on
Yeah,
top of the debate world last time. Where did he fall this time?
I thought he was totally forgettable. I mean, the only thing I remember about that is him saying that he slept with the teacher for 38 years. Uh, yeah, that was great, and I guess that was to make Joe Biden look good. Which, like, I actually thought that that was a really sleazy remark. I forget who said that, but like, Biden's been sleeping around, been sleeping with someone in the teachers union. Yeah, it's his freaking
Well,
wife. Like,
well, and was it that, or was
I
it
thought that was
Scott
a
he was responding to? I think it was Scott he was responding to, and he mentioned something about sleeping around, and then Pence tried throwing that in.
yeah. Pence was responding to it, but yeah, there was a comment made that Joe Biden is just basically in bed with the teachers unions, and it's like, well, of course he's in bed with the teachers unions. He sleeps with one, and it's like, yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
get it, but to me, it was actually, I thought it was a little uncouth, frankly, and
and it's off brand for Pence. If Ramaswamy said something like that, it's more on brand for him to be
yeah,
fun, electric. But for Pence, I don't want to think about that. He's
yeah.
he's of a certain
Ah, so you want to
demographic.
think about that with Ramaswamy?
I won't put myself into that one. But there's a
uh,
level of respect I want to have for a man who is well respected with his gray hair versus someone who's young and youthful. Um,
yeah,
I can't relate to Pence 38 years of marriage. And I think he was making a valid point. The joke fell flat and it
yeah.
was
Kind of
off
fell
brand.
flat like Chris Christie's Donald Duck. Actually, before we go, we have to touch on that. Like, what was that? Chris Christie was going and going and going, and he was like, "If you don't show up to this debate, we're gonna start calling you Donald Duck." And I was like, "What?" I was, I was totally caught off guard by that. That was
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
that
I
was,
think that was a
that
huge
was
thing of
awkward,
like,
and I just thought of Donald, Duck like quacking, and I was like, okay, that was something.
it really was. Yeah, I think that's Trump is the king of nicknames. He comes up with the stupidest nicknames, but they stick. Crooked Hillary, and you his names stick. It's an iconic part of his brand. Christie, I feel like, was trying to fight fire with fire. Donald Duck, man, you could have come up with anything else. Like that's the best you got.
I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks it's so bad it actually could stick. Maybe like
Yeah,
I don't know. It'd have to be like a unified group. Like everyone agrees. Okay, yes, we're gonna start calling him Donald Duck. But I mean, just I would think that if it was persistent enough and you had enough people calling it, it would actually start to get pretty annoying.
hmm
And especially if you had started having running ads with like Donald Trump with Donald Duck. You know,
but the
but
issue is Christie can only get 2.9% of the country, or no, not even the country, the GOP to say Donald
yeah.
Duck. Because he doesn't have the weight. Yeah,
Oh my god.
it was definitely a let's see if we can make something out of nothing moment for Christie.
Yeah, that was good. But
Which I feel
would
like
you,
was most of his night. I really don't get a sense that Christie's running for president anymore. I really think Christie's running to endorse. I think comments like that just prove the point for me. He really wants to have as much strength behind him that when he endorses someone, it's going to mean a lot.
yeah, no, I agree. Um, well, I think for next week we're going to try and have a special guest on. The topic has yet to be determined, so we'll keep you guys posted in terms of what we'll be doing, or maybe it'll just be a surprise. I don't know, but I think this is a good way to recap. This has been a good recap of the debate. There's not a whole lot of insights that we can offer in terms of where the race is going to head. I think it's going to largely stay in the same place. But did you have
They
any
didn't,
last thoughts, Jacob?
they didn't offer closing remarks to the candidates, so
Oh, that was
why
weird as hell.
why don't we get we shouldn't get
Yeah.
closing
All right.
remarks
Bye.
either.
Bye. Yuppies and harpoons.
Yuppies and RPs, like and subscribe. Thank you.
Yeah. Please. Bye.